Welcome, everybody, to Monday Afternoon Roundtable. We've got another exciting and wonderful podcast and episode.
Exciting and
wonderful. This is
We hope.
Yeah, we hope. We always plan on that, right? This is episode 27, and we've got a great topic today. We're going to talk about jury selection and how important it is. And we've got a lot of experience in this from our law enforcement days as well as our private investigator days and that we're doing now. Real important before we start, I want to put this out here. We are not attorneys. We're private investigators. None of us are attorneys. We don't have
Not
any
giving legal advice.
Zero legal advice, but this is just on the topic of jury selection and how important it is in trials of any kind. David's done a lot of research on the matter and background, and he's going to go over that, and then we're going to talk about all three of our experiences in it.
Sounds good.
All right.
I want to open it up with a quote by Clarence Darrow. He was a defense attorney back in 1936, and I love his quote. It says, "Never forget, almost every case has been won or lost when the jury is sworn." Mm-hmm. Think about that. Yeah. It's true.
At the very beginning of
but most cases, and you probably know this as well, that most cases in criminal and civil court are handled before it ever goes to the jury. Mm-hmm. Most of them. But the ones that do go to a jury, I think it's important for the defense to look at jury science, whether they do it within their own firm or whether they contract it out. And jury selection process or jury science is a big deal right now. Mm-hmm. We saw it in O.J. Simpson trial, for an example. The lady that did that was Joellen Demetrius, excuse me, I mispronounced her name. She was the consultant hired. The state hired a jury consultant from the beginning. They fired them about halfway through. They didn't like what they were producing before the trial ever got started during the research part of it. Well, the defense hired Miss Demetrius, and she come in and took names and pretty much put it all out there. And, of course, we know the outcome of that case.
Maybe the state should have kept the original.
Well, they should have probably. But all of you remember, and I don't know if you do or not, but the book, Runaway Jury in the movie, it's a John Grisham novel. I think Gene Hackman played the lead role in that. He wasn't the lead, but he was the jury consultant in that movie that they played based on the novel. Really good book where they sued the firearm industry for a mass shooting. And it was filmed either in the early 90s or late 90s. And it was a pretty good movie. If you're in the jury selection, jury science, it was a good movie based on that. But they did things that are a little bit unethical, where inside the courtroom they were doing, or outside the courtroom they were doing private investigations on the potential juror people, the jury pope or the pool, where they were going out finding out everything about them. They were following them and recording everything they did. They had mics hooked up to the attorneys where he could speak to them from his war room that he had set up with all the information there in front of him. It was a pretty cool movie, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it or reading the book. But it's everything in North Carolina is based on the voir dire, when the defense and the prosecution, when they can question the jurors, the potential jurors. And voir dire is a French term which means to speak the truth. Mm-hmm. And we've all witnessed that before when and I love to watch that part of a trial, because you really get to see the inner workings of the judicial system, the way it works. And I think it's one of the most important parts, in my opinion, is that seated jury. When you finally get that jury together that you're satisfied with, that you're comfortable with, and you feel is going to give your client the best result or the best verdict or the best outcome for the trial. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work, and I've worked on jury consulting several times during my career. One was a civil case that involved a case where a medical malpractice suit, and it was a long, drawn-out trial. They hired me before the trial started, and I was able to work with the defense team, which was large, and we were able to put together, we had the complete jury pool. It was a unique trial, and just because of the venue where we were. It was, and to go a little bit further, to step ahead a little bit, it was the largest verdict ever given in that county for a civil case. So we were fortunate. We got the good outcome that we did. But the jury selection was like pulling teeth because of who I wanted for that jury and to kind of match up with our client and the situation. I went as far as to look at everything I could about that individual juror. And I think the jury pool consisted of 140 people. And, of course, you come down to 13 or 14 with the alternates. Mm-hmm. And we were able to put together what I felt was a strong case. And ultimately, we won. Mm-hmm. In North Carolina, Chapter 15A 1217 is the peremptory challenges that the attorneys and the prosecutor has in a capital case. And we were talking this before we went on air. Each defendant is allowed 14 challenges in a capital murder case. Mm-hmm. In other words, they can let that individual go for any reason.
Yeah, and I did not know it was that high.
I didn't either. I didn't know it was 14. In a non-capital case, it's 6 challenges where they can let them go. They don't have to give a cause. And if they elect to remove a juror for cause, then there has to be a certain reason. In other words, it can be for a noticeable bias or an obvious bias on this individual, or they come into court and they have guilty written on their shirt. I'm just being cute, but they can, any reason that you may see that individual's obviously bringing
in smaller
something.
counties, you run into, I know the lawyer,
right?
I know the prosecutor. Yeah. I know the defendant.
Relationships.
I know the judge.
And I got a good story about that later. We'll hit on.
Go ahead. I want to hear your story.
Well, it was one of your cases. I was still a police officer. I get called for jury duty. I'm the first.
I remember that.
I'm the first name they picked out of the 104 or 144 or whatever. You're working as the private eye for the defendant in a criminal case. Mm-hmm. The defense attorney, I known him since I was 19. Mm-hmm. The judge, I knew him. I did not know the ADA, didn't know him at all. And the criminal case, and it was a sexual offense on a child, or and I have extensive training on that. They questioned me for about an hour.
I remember that.
And I was really wanting to be on it, but I knew they weren't going to keep me. But yeah, I was surprised they kept me as long as they did.
Why did it take an hour to excuse you?
I don't know.
What were some of the questions
they asked me? What part of the county I lived in, where my kids went to school, what my wife did, what my training was, my experience in law enforcement. They asked me if I could be biased or if I'd be unbiased, regardless of who I knew in the case. And where it got hemmed up at, it wasn't on any biases. It was my training. I had more training than the officer, and the state excused me on.
Right.
I mean, I had extensive training. I'm not trying to brag. That's not the point. But the detective had a lot less experience than I did, especially in that arena or that type of crime. And I wasn't expected to get picked, and then I got picked very first one. I thought, well, this will be fun.
And we had a successful outcome in that trial. Just to remind you, simply because they had a poor case going in, and we've all three had them where we have cases where we know beyond a reasonable doubt our client or the defendant is guilty as charged, but we still do the best we can. This case, that young man was not guilty. There's no way he was, based on our investigation. I didn't do the jury selection on it. I helped. I was part of that defense team that worked, to pick the jury, but we were able to question those jurors after they offered a misdemeanor assault. I think is what they offered, which was acceptable, and the client said, by all means, but it was just, there was a lot of issues with that case, but I was able to, with the attorney, the judge provided us that opportunity at the end of the trial to speak with each one of those jurors. Each one, all 12 jurors said, your client was not guilty, and we knew that. And based on the investigation, because the state finished their round before they offered the plea. But we were able to. They saw what we had in our criminal defense investigation, and they said, we just don't have a strong enough case. They should have realized that before it went to trial.
Well, I'm sure they did realize that.
Yeah.
They were just, they don't know that they have to roll the dice sometimes.
Yeah.
I understand
Once they get to that certain point, they have to go forward.
Yes, they do. But anyhow, I remember that now. A lot of work goes if they hire the defense team or the plaintiff's defense or team puts together a jury science group or a jury investigators or whatever it may be. You got to start at the very beginning. You get all those names, anywhere from 120 to 150 names, and then you got to do backgrounds on each one, and that takes a lot of work, costs a lot of money, and you're looking at the socioeconomic status, any media that they may have drawn during their lifetime, as far as their relatives, who their relatives might be, and then you go into the experience of the juror. What kind of work they do. How aware are they of the crime that was committed or the charge that the individual's charged with? And it's just a whole lot of front end work going into it. Another one that we did, we had each person and we had a file for each individual, the potential jurors, because we didn't know who was going to be, picked by the clerk. And when the name was pulled up, the defense lawyer could see who that individual was. That bio come up. And I made it simple because, I had my laptop, the defense team at the table had their laptops, and they could see if red, yellow, and green. If it was a red, meaning we didn't want this individual, they're totally against what we're here for, they're going to vote against us for the most part based on my background investigation. Yellow meant that, okay, we could probably live with them if we had to, if we were out of preemptories, or we couldn't get them released for cause, then we'd probably accept them. Green meant let's go, take them, no question, the simple voir dire, let's go to the next one. And they pretty much stayed by that. There was one juror that they questioned. So we took a break and we go back into the room, and that potential juror was a retired nurse, a registered nurse. She was one of the old school, hardcore nurses. Didn't take any bullshit from anybody, and I wanted to keep her. Well, the defense team kind of like, no, she's too involved. She understands the mechanics of what's going on with this case. And I said, exactly. That's what
makes a good juror.
Because I wanted to keep her. They let me keep her. Long story short, she became the foreman, or I think she was the foreman of the jury. Yeah, foreperson, excuse me. And they come back with a positive verdict for our client. But it was because she understood what was right and what was wrong. And where they tried to skirt the issue of the doctor patient privileges and all the issues that go along with that, she was able to understand what was right and what was wrong. So she stood by us.
There's a difference between a civil jury and a criminal jury.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's by all means, especially if it's a capital case, Tim, when you're looking at the individual going to be executed. And I sat on a capital case where I was selected as a jury person for that case. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking because they want to know the details of how you're going to respond. Are you for or against capital punishment? And that's the number one question asked. And I was able to pull one of the questionnaires, and I had to fill out one of those questionnaires when I was a juror. And it's pretty invasive, the things they want to know. And it's up to the judge whether they allow the questionnaire or not. But in all capital cases, it's pretty much every time that there's a questionnaire. But they ask, like, where do you live in the county, which is important. Of course, your gender and your age. But they get into your occupation. What do you do for a living? But what I try to do after I get the jury questionnaire, if there's one available, then I want to dig a little deeper based on those answers that potential juror provided. I want to dig deeper. Are they a member of which church? What denomination? Are they registered, Democrat, Republican, Independent? How often do they vote? Do they vote every cycle? Like if I were doing an investigation with Tim right now, I would see pretty quick how he's registered. He votes in every political cycle. So he's pretty much, which way he leans on the political spectrum. And that's important, I think.
You'll be able to see which primary
right.
you vote,
Especially when you have a minority client or minority defendant, and you're in a predominantly white jury pool,
Or vice versa.
or
It could
the
go-
other way around.
yeah.
Right. And you've got to look at all aspects of that, the demographics of that area, the specialized training or background that potential juror may have. For an example, a friend of mine who's a medical doctor was picked for a jury case, and it was a civil case, which even more so important, him being in the medical field. But they, as soon as they asked him that question, they pretty much they relieved him and let him go. It wasn't for cause, but they let him go. I always heard the rule of thumb was if the individual's profession starts with a P, always let them go. That was the rule of thumb back in the day. And I read that somewhere in some of my research. If you're a physician, if you're a prostitute, if you're a police officer, if it started with a P, let them go.
You might want to keep the prostitute on if you're trying to prostitute.
Yeah, that's true. But it was kind of funny. That was in some of my research, and I remembered that.
What about a pimp?
Pimp's in there. It was in there. All right, I'm going to tell you a story about a case like that. We had a case involving in North Carolina, and it's pretty unique. There's only 4 or 5 states that have what's called alienation of affection. You know what that means? Mm-hmm. And it's used in domestic cases where one spouse sues another, one's girlfriend or boyfriend. And this was a gentleman, and we were working for him, friend of mine, and he swears to this day, and I do believe him, he was not involved in any kind of sexual relationships with the young lady, but this lady's husband sued him. And this guy was fairly wealthy and knew that he was going to get some money out of him, and so it went to trial. And during our investigation, we were able to I pulled the plaintiff in the case, and I looked at everything about him. I did my background, did my homework, and we were able to show, Jason, that this guy was addicted to pornography. And when I say addicted, he was addicted. But, I mean, I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent, but this case dealt with a lot of sexual innuendos. Mm-hmm. So in doing so, we wanted to ask the jurors, which I knew, I said, the judge is not going to allow this. Not going to allow it, but we got to try. We wanted to ask each juror, now just picture this, and all of you been in court and seen this. We asked the judge if we could ask each individual juror during the voir dire if they watch pornography. And this was a Southern Baptist, straight-laced, conservative Superior Court judge. And I knew what the answer was going to be. And the attorneys were able to make an argument during their motion saying, this is why we need to do this. Mm-hmm. It's part of this case. If you look at all the down and dirty,
the significance
with no pun intended, there was a lot weighing on it, and he allowed it. And so I'm going, God, this is going to be great. Soon as that question was asked, the color went out of the plaintiff's face. I mean, literally, it was like oh, hell, they know something. They know something. At the break, they offered our client a plea or a settlement. You know, will you pay this? And he'd already said, David, I want this done with. I don't want this to hurt me. I don't want it to hurt me financially. But, of course, I don't want it to be public. So it was a no-brainer. He took that plea or that settlement, that offer. And but in asking those 12 jurors, I'm going through saying, okay, this one's going to say yes, this one's going to say no. But the first one they asked, he was a good old boy like us, and he's there and he goes, I'm a product of the 60s. Hell yeah, I watched porn. And I thought
while I was eating Cheetos.
While I was watching, drinking cold beer. But anyhow, it was out of 12, I think 10 said yes or had watched it. We didn't go into detail. And the judge, he said, if you don't want to answer it, we'll go to the next one. You don't have to answer this. 11 of them answered. One was, I'm not answering that. No such question. She got mad.
That means she did.
I know, right? That's what I told them. Anyway.
If they refuse, that means they did.
But
Let's get back to the jury.
But I'm watching each one of them when they were giving their response to kind of see if they were being truthful or not. And that's good, too. When you can sit in that courtroom and you're seeing eye to eye to that juror, you can tell when they're fudging a little bit or when they're not comfortable, especially when they start moving into seat. But when that judge told him what he was going to ask, and that poor guy that was first, he's like, damn. But he was honest. He didn't he told the truth. And then after that, it pretty much broke the silence, and all of them were honest. But that changed the course of that trial because we were able to interject what we felt was important during the voir dire. So it ended up being a successful for our client.
Well, that also brings up a point, and I'm sure both of you have experienced. I've seen it, where you get a potential juror that you've got on the green list that you think,
right,
we need this one, and they come in, and then they offer up things that might change your mind. For instance, they might still believe in all the things that you're they whatever, like we're talking about they might be for capital punishment or against it, whichever one you want, but they're against having to be there as a jury member. They're like, I got to work. I'm a single parent. I've got this, or I can work 2 jobs.
And it's hard on jurors.
And you can tell, and then you're thinking, well, are they just going to go with the flow?
Right.
Are they going to go with whatever has the easiest outcome? Are they going to, are they actually, so then that might change. You have to.
But that happened to me in a case where the ADA had me to sit beside of him during jury selection, which is
common.
It was a murder trial, and the number one juror said, "I know Tim. How good do you know?" Well, we'd been on vacation together. Number 2, he's done. Number 2, I know Tim. And then the number 3, they didn't ask him a question. Said, "Let me ask you a question. Do you know Detective Munday?" And it became a joke.
And that happens.
But you run into that in small counties.
Sure you do.
You're going, and you've been around for 20 years. People know you. But they see number 1 get off for knowing me, so they thought,
I'm gonna try that.
I know him too.
Well, when I was on the murder case, where I was a juror, we had one guy, and it was because you hear everything back in that room. When in other words, when their numbers picked, everybody goes into a room when they take a recess or a break or whatever. So I'm in the back, and this guy, he goes, "I'm gonna tell him I can't hear." And I said, and I knew he wasn't going to be a good juror. And so when we get back in, he would always ask him to repeat. Can you repeat? This guy, he could have got an Emmy award. He was so good. And here's the good part: when they finally allowed him to leave for cause because he had a hearing impairment. He walks by us, the 4 that are seated, and he goes, he winked and did a thumbs up. When we walked by, it's like,
Yeah.
I got out of this one. Had another one, and I'll let you. Had another one, a young man, and he would have potentially been a pretty good juror. He was less than 25, open-minded kid, and I was hoping that they would pick him. And he told the judge, he was almost in tears. He said, "My employer said they're going to fire me if I got picked for this jury."
Yes, it is.
And that judge, I'll never forget it. He says, "We're going to take a break." He says, "Right here at lunchtime." He says, "But Mr. Bailiff, will you go and summon such and such where this guy worked?" He was a mechanic, big dealership. They go and they get the head mechanic or whoever with that dealership brought him in before that judge. We didn't get to see it, but I heard about it later. He let him know real quick who was going to go to jail, that he was going to go to jail, that was his civil duty to come in and serve as a juror, that nobody's going to fire anybody. That guy was crying when he left, when I heard it later. But it's tough because you miss work, and it's what, $20 a day you're going to get if you're lucky. And so it's a tough thing. And some of these cases go on for weeks.
Oh, yeah.
They're not
Imagine if you get picked for the grand jury.
True.
Yeah.
And that's good for a year.
Yeah.
Right?
And you got to alienate yourself from your family and what's going on in the world.
Right.
It's got to be
supposed to.
Yeah, you're supposed. I mean,
And a lot of cases have been won or lost because they find out later that juror checked on social media during the night or asked questions or done inquiries on that particular
went to the
case.
scene or something like that.
Because it's just human nature. You want to know as much as you can about it. And then you have those jurors who want to be jurors, and you can tell that. You can say, he wants to be a juror. She wants to be a juror too bad. So let's back off of that one.
And that was me. I probably screwed. I want to be a juror.
Right. But I can't believe they questioned you as long as they did. That was pretty bizarre, knowing that they were going to use you to start with.
And going back to what you brought up about the guy with the hearing impairment, every one of us have seen it, where it be real or make-believe by the juror. that they have something. They might have, I can't sit this long, or I have to go to the restroom frequently, or the hard of hearing, or I got sleep apnea. I mean, I've seen all of these.
I have too.
You know, and some might be legitimate.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to say, well, you're a liar.
Most of them, I'm sure, are.
Probably are, yeah.
Right.
Because you're picking just random people in the community.
But you often see biases in the voir dire when they're asking the questions based on, okay, what do you think about this group of people? What do you think about this situation? And sometimes those biases are recognized without even asking the direct question. You can hear it in their responses, knowing good and well. But a lot of times that's when that attorney has to say, I only have one more peremptory left, so I'm going to say I want this gentleman or this lady excused for cause because I feel there's biases there, but they have to show that. That's difficult.
And I've seen it more than once on sexual cases,
Right.
where a potential juror breaks down during the questioning because they have been a victim.
Have you guys ever seen the jury pool deleted?
Oh, you mean
Like
they
went through
run
the
through
whole-
it? Yes,
I
on a
have.
murder case in Caldwell County.
I was on the, and the judge subpoenaed every deputy in the courthouse to his desk, and he gave us subpoenas and said, "Bring me 20,
I remember that.
Open-ended subpoenas.
Yeah.
20 right now." And Lenore Mall was a new mall. Walmart hadn't been built yet, so we went to the stores, the mall,
I remember.
and if you didn't have a baby or whatever, if you were walking through the mall by yourself, check their ID. If they were residents, you took them to the courthouse. You
remember.
talking about mad.
Yeah.
And there was one lady I can never forget. She said, "I'd love to be a juror." I said, "Well, let's go." And, and she knew Mom, but you talk that you're going to get cussed if you pull somebody out of.
I've seen it. It's because they run out a lot
Back
of times.
then, they let too
up to
many
the
people
judge.
have excuses
They did.
before the trial date.
Yeah. And so the pool was
about
already,
anybody could say, "Yeah, you're excused. You're excused." Now they don't do that, and that's why when you go through 100 people, or you're supposed to have 100-person pool, and you open day of court, there's 50 people there. You know.
And there was one Donald Zoller from his New York attorney. He made the comment, it's gotten to the point where if the case is large enough, it's almost malpractice not to use a jury consultant.
Yeah.
And I get that. If it's these like the voting or the voting systems case, the Dominion case, excuse me, thank you. You know they had jury consultants there. Yeah. They had to. In these multi-million-dollar settlement cases, and that one was $748 million or something like that, or close to $800 million settlement. You know, they had jury consultants there. So
it was $800 million. It's $878.
That's right. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Yeah.
Now, in criminal defense, I see the defense way ahead of the state in this jury science.
Yes.
Because a lot of the local judicial districts don't have investigators
They don't have the time or the money.
the resources. Now, they might do it quick,
Down and dirty, yeah. But, and they'll bring the officer in because they usually know most of the people in the community, and they can sit there and say no, yes.
Go through the list.
You know, they got a little check. They got a little system in place where they can check off on. But in our cases that we're working for the indigent services, we're serving a lot of times as a jury consultant because we're giving them feedback and taking that information and helping them in selecting that juror during the voir dire. We're also offering questions to provide during the voir dire. I'm going to ask you this. This is something that was a case one time we were working, and you arrive in the parking lot and you see where the jury pool parks, you see bumper stickers. And that tells you a lot.
What type of vehicles they even
what
drive.
What type vehicle they're in. It kind of gives you their socioeconomic status. I remember the guy that we were suing in this case, a medical doctor, was driving a rental Chevrolet Camry or excuse me, Chevrolet Cavalier or something like that, a little four-door vehicle, and come into the courtroom, but he had a Mercedes and a Porsche that he drove regularly. He didn't want those jurors to see, which was good advice on his attorney to do that. Yeah. But as Tim says, you can sit out there in that parking lot and you can see what they're pulling up in. If they're pulling up in a farm truck, okay, that guy's a farmer. If they pull up in a a slick SUV. Okay, that's a maybe a single mom, or they got these little stickers in the back of the car, how many kids they have, and all these other things. And I know that's far reaching, but a lot of them. The case I was a juror on, they asked me the question, "What news media do you watch?" Boom, that's a biggie. There's 3 major news networks on cable: MSNBC, Fox, and CNN. And they can pretty much tell which way you were leaning. You could tell. Then they want to know which newspapers you read. They even asked the question, "What was your last book that you read?" Which I felt was an interesting question on that questionnaire. But it tells a lot about that person, how much they're going to be able to comprehend, what they can understand, the technicality of the case. If it's a deep technical case involving medical malpractice or technology-driven cases, then you're going to need that professional on that juror.
I've seen that this is not so much in jury selection, but it's after the jury's been picked where the state will bring up the law and order or CSI in their opening statement. Hey, cases don't work out like they do in us 1 hour.
Yeah, we're not going to solve this in 1 hour.
Yeah, so don't expect it to be exactly. And to me, that's not part of jury selection, but it is. It's part of.
I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
What kind of TV shows do you watch? And they'll tell you, "Oh, I love murder mysteries or crime solving shows," and that lets you know, okay, this person's going to think they're going to be able to do this, this, and this, and we're not. So, another thing I look at, and the lawyers look at me like I was crazy. I look at their shoes. That tells you a lot about an individual, and their pocketbooks or their purses that the ladies were carrying. That tells you a lot. The rings or the jewelry that individual may be wearing, the type watch, like Tim's watch that he's wearing. Some people do or some people don't. But you can pretty much tell. Some come into court with their coat and tie. Some come in with their T-shirts on. It just gives you a little bit more background based on their appearance, how they might relate to your client.
You can also, before anybody comes out there, when it's just the people coming into the area or the room, whatever, the courtroom, and the bailiff is giving instructions before the judge or any of the attorneys come out, hey, this is what's going to happen. Watch how they react to the instructions, just how they interact with the bailiff, or they ask a question, or if the bailiff says something, they might roll their eyes, or they might be real intent on listening what they're saying. Like, I want to get all these instructions in, or they're on their phone, even though they're not supposed to, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
You can learn just by watching that before it's even starting.
When that's important, when they offer a plea in midstream, when they come to you and say, okay, we're going to offer this plea, and you can look back at your notes and you can say, juror number 8 was intense and didn't like our response from our defense attorney or didn't like our attorney, period. You can tell. You can tell by the rolling of their eyes, by the way they're sitting in the seat, fidgeting, and that gives you a kind of a heads up.
And when the attorney is asking the questions, you can watch the jury and see how they're reacting.
Absolutely.
And when the person on the witness is answering, it gives you kind of a feel, from day to day or break to break. Hey, juror number 7, they were, you could see the disgust on their face when they were, you can see that.
Right. And you remember the case that I had in Lincoln County where you come in and speak with the judge one day, and I was doing jury selection on that case, and you come in, the jury hadn't been seated yet, I don't think.
I was getting a search warrant. So,
yeah. And I said, "Here's my brother," and I didn't know how the jury was going to respond. You mentioned a while ago that you had where a juror, it was a sex case, and one of the jurors during the break, you could tell he didn't want to be there, period. I mean, he was upset. He hadn't even been seated yet. He was still in the jury pool. Female judge, he gets up and screams to the top of his lungs, "Your Honor, I can't be here. I'm a victim of sexual abuse when I was a child, da-da-da-da." Well, I turn around to see who this person was because I had a list of everybody. I wanted to make sure that I got his name. And when I turned around, the judge got on to me because I started taking notes on my laptop. She questioned what I was doing. She didn't address him. Well, she did. She told him, "Sir, sit down." Well, she said, "Sir, what are you typing? What are you doing?" And I told her, I said, "I'm here as a consultant I'm an investigator." And she said, and she could tell she didn't want any part of jury selection or jury consulting on her time. I explained to her, I was just writing down what he was just saying. Duh. We don't want this individual on our juror. Of course, he was relieved, but he had to be brought in, set back down on his own, give his little spiel of what happened. And he was assaulted when he was a child. And I get that. I do. But yet, he poisoned all the other jurors that were seated there.
Yeah.
Every one of them. So we had a hell of a mistrial if we needed it. But that was, and I got confused a while ago, that was the one that was offered a plea during midstream that we took. The one you were on, we got a not guilty on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a full not guilty. But it's tough because you never know. You never know how that jury's going to react once they go into that room behind that closed door.
And out of the 12 that you have, you're going to have one, and it may not be the 4-person, but you're going to have one that's the alpha personality.
Right.
And you're going to have one that is the weakest personality. And then you're going to have the rest are in between.
Yeah.
And some are going to say, well, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I just want to get out of here. I'm going to do whatever's the easiest for me so I can go back to work or go back to do this. And some are going to sit and fight for as long as they need to. They're going to fight for the cause.
The best outcome is going to be a not guilty. The second best outcome is going to be a hung jury. And sometimes that's what you need to look for, like you're talking about. I just need one juror that's going to be hesitant. They're going to say no, have that understanding that, well, not everyone's guilty. Is that, did your client, did they meet all the elements, or did they have some question in their mind? And that's a good point, because if you can pick one of those, have one of those seated on the jury, when the evidence is overwhelming on your client, if you could just get that hung jury.
And that they're going to err on the side of caution.
Right.
They're going to say, well, if I do this, I don't want an innocent person going to jail.
Or going to the death chamber.
Yeah. That's what they're when you're looking at defense-wise in a criminal case.
Right. And civil cases are different because it's all money. It's somebody paying someone else for a wrong. And sometimes those get.
You don't have to have unanimous on civil.
No, you don't. That's true. And the dynamics are totally different. But when you go into each one, you got to make sure you know what's going on.
And like when you was talking about with the alienation of affection, what if you get somebody on the jury pool that had a spouse that cheated on him?
And we asked that question. He did allow us to ask that question. Have they ever been involved in extramarital
But how many people
affairs?
is going to tell the truth?
Well, a couple of them did.
Some will, and some
A couple of them said, yeah.
Some will and some won't.
Yeah.
And the ones that
90%
won't,
of them won't.
they're going. But they're still going to hold it against.
Right.
That's what you got to
But
worry
a
about.
good consultant can sit there and say, he's lying or she's lying.
Yeah.
And so, and here's how I can tell. Or your research that you do based on your backgrounds sometimes will show that, sometimes won't. But anyhow, it's tough, especially on civil cases, domestic cases.
I'm going to throw a real big curveball at you, both of you. When I was in college, we had to write a paper on this. What do you and there's been debates about it. What do you think about professional jurors or juries where you don't? And the argument is that when you pull from the group, your citizens, they just get overwhelmed and they tune a lot of stuff out.
Explain a little deeper. Are you talking about a focus group or
no,
prior to the
no,
case?
Where the premise is you have a group of people that are professional jurors, and they're picked. It's not the same group.
Okay.
But you have a group that you pick from, but that they get paid for a living to do that.
Right.
To me, I think it's bad because
I do too.
It could be manipulated.
It could be tainted.
Yeah. But I understand the argument.
My choice would be, if I was guilty of sin, I would ask for be tried by a judge without a jury.
And there's pros and cons with that. That's a good comment. But and to your point,
if I'm guilty of sin, I'm not going to ask a jury.
A lot of your old school attorneys believe in the concept that jury consulting is wrong. That you have that gut feeling that's going to be a good juror, or that's not, or I'm going to take the first 12. So I've had attorneys do that.
I don't understand it. I don't believe in it, but I understand whether.
But that's the true meaning of jury of your peers. And when you go out and you're specific with your juror. And that was pretty cool white paper. I'd like to read that research that was done on it, because I've never heard of that. Now, focus groups is important. I think, and there's a law firm out of Tennessee that I work with. They have a mock courtroom in their office, which is damn cool, with all just like we got right here, with all the recording equipment. And they bring in people, that are potential, not the jurors for this case, but people, and they get their side. And they ask them questions. Well, what do you think about this? What was your feeling about this part of the trial? And they break it up into components. And a lot of times, they get a good read from that.
And on that end, I've seen it firsthand as the juror, and from being a law enforcement, I've seen clerk of court explain to the potential jurors what the process is. And I've seen some of them explain it really well, and sometimes they just make it worse.
Yeah.
Where you can, once they walk out, you see all the citizens like, oh my God, what am I in for? Like this is the end of the world. I wish I wasn't here. And they've just killed the process right then. And, if you explain it right when they come, or the judge or whoever, that each county has a different way of doing things, and each judge does.
Yes.
That judge, that's their courtroom. I don't care. It's not the North Carolina's, or it's not fair. It's theirs when they're there.
They're in Georgia.
And let's go to the change of venue situation where a case is moved because of the news media and all the everything about the trial is out there and everybody knows about it, the commonality of it. And so you get a change of venue, then that's when that jury consultant is extremely important, but that's where the judge is important in recognizing the fact, yes, we need a change of venue, or no, we don't. So,
and you always got to just be able to be flexible and play with, the rules you're given at the last minute or as the game goes on, because they're going to change. When you think you've got it this way, you might have a judge from the eastern end of the state that you've never, had anything in front of, and then they do things different. You just got to be able to go with the flow.
But that's where a good jury consultant can let that attorney know this is the background on this judge.
Yeah.
Most of them know.
Yeah.
Most of them. But every once in a while you get a special judge and you really don't know all the history and the background with that individual. And so you got to do a little digging. Most of the attorneys know the judges. Now, one thing that's important is how that jury is going to respond to your attorney, the one you're working for. Is your attorney overbearing? Do they come in and are they cocky? You can tell when a jury doesn't like that individual, and you can tell it. And you can go back in the back room, and I've done it a couple times. The jury doesn't like you.
You need to tone it down. Back a little bit.
Yeah, the jury doesn't like you, and I'm just telling you this is where we are. You've pissed a couple of the jurors off already, number 12 and number 8. And you can be specific, and that happens quite a bit more often than not. Most of the attorneys I work with, they're laid back, and they can, like Joel Harbison, the one that come on our show as a guest on our show. He's the best I've ever seen with jurors. He's smooth. He makes them feel comfortable. He's not overbearing, but he lets them know from the beginning, here's what my expectations are. He even puts it on a whiteboard behind them. This is what you got to do to find my client guilty. You got to meet each one of these elements, and you got to reach beyond a reasonable doubt. And he explains a reasonable doubt, what it means.
That's good.
So then I'm not watching him.
He should do that.
Yes, all of them should, but they don't. I'm looking at that jury, and I can say, they're all in, or no, you got a couple that are still stragglers. You need to reel them in very quick. In other words, what I'm saying at lunch, when we go to lunch, I say, okay, juror number 6 and number 9, make eye contact with them. Let them know who you are and what you stand for, and that you get them. You understand they don't want to be here, or they got other issues, or they've been convicted of a crime before. Get on their level, and you can tell it makes a difference.
And during deliberation, you start thinking, well, juror number 7 or juror they're the one holding out. You start talking about, and the longer it goes,
and it works both ways.
It does.
While we were officers, we were conversing with the district attorney, and now we're on the other side of the table,
and that's the cool part about it. We've seen both sides.
Yes, and
that's where we're better at most consultants.
Yes,
I think once the trial started, your job should be nothing but watching the jury's eyes,
Bingo.
Watching their heads.
Everything about them.
A lot of women will drop their head when somebody's testifying on something they don't want to hear.
It's making them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or you'll be surprised the ones fall asleep.
Well, they fall asleep. That's when you. When you hit the table.
Or keep notes.
Yeah.
Some judges will let them do that. Some won't.
Most criminal cases, felony cases, or especially capital cases, they'll allow them, but can't take them out of the courtroom, or they can take them back in the room with them, but they can't take them home, of course. But those that are taking copious notes, okay, you got to be careful, or they're really paying attention. Then you got those over there that are half asleep, and I've seen that more times than not. And that's when the judge, okay, it's time to take a break.
Yeah.
And so,
And it's hard. I mean,
it's hard.
It's sitting
Yes,
there,
it's hard,
especially after lunch.
I'll never forget. I was in a big civil case, huge. And I had my phone the volume turned all the way down and off. The damn weather alert thing went off. You know how it does? It's loud as hell. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to jail. I'm going to jail." He looked at me and I said, "Your Honor, it's a tornado." And he said, "Good." He said, "Let's evacuate." And it was a damn tornado in the area. So luckily I didn't get my ass in trouble. I've seen judges berate people for their, phone going off during a trial. But trials are each one's different. They're exciting because you get to see the inner workings of the judicial system, but it's good when you can leave there. It was like that jury that I was talking about, the one with the malpractice. When that jury come back with that strong verdict, that big verdict, it just made me feel good because I was so relieved. God, okay, we got to win. Because they were relying on what I was providing. Not just what I was providing. They put on a hell of a case, for one. But yet it was good to see the end result.
Yeah.
The hard work being paid off.
And I always loved going to trial, especially as an officer, because I learned, and I still learn today.
Sure.
But you learn something every time you're in a trial, every single time.
And I think that's one thing that I'm proud of the Highway Patrol about, because we had so much training on court preparation and court testimony. I remember we had to go to we had a courtroom set up, and we had to go in there and do mock trials all the time to prepare and to be able to testify in court. Because we had a lot of cases.
Man, people don't realize how many go to a jury trial.
I know.
They think,
Simple.
but
DWI, for example, and being able to testify, and but it's just always good. But in Tim's case, in a small county where everybody knew him, that's more prevalent than people think too. They may know the attorney, they know everybody in the courtroom. The case I was on, the murder case, I knew the defense lawyer, the DA, the judge, and they asked me, "Who all do you know?" And I said, "Well, okay, I started at the judge,
the bailiff."
I did. I knew them all. And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Was that going to affect the outcome of your decision?" I said, "No." The big argument with them was my feeling on the death penalty. Because I was a little bit wiggly-waggly. I was like, I believe in capital punishment in certain situations. So I said, okay, that was my ticket. I'm out of here. But no, they seated me on that jury. Both sides did. So it was like, okay, here we go. Luckily, he pled out before it ever went to trial. Thank goodness. But it's tough being a juror, but I think it's your civic responsibility to go in and serve on those jurors, and people should take it serious when they go. Employers should take it serious when their subordinates are called for jury duty. But it's
one quick story before we close out. I was going before the grand jury, and I told this story before. A person that was sitting on the grand jury was who we were indicting.
How did that work out?
Yes. So we go before the judge that morning and says, "We got a problem." He said, "No, you have a problem." And we told him. He said, "I've never heard of that."
I've never heard of it either.
Could they just pull
We
them
said,
out?
"What are we going to do?" So he did his research, and he pulled that one juror out for one grand jury hearing, and then goes back in. And then I said,
Was there a true bill?
Well, that's what I said. Once a true bill, a true bill's answered that day. And I said, once a true bill of indictment, still doesn't matter because they're not convicted. They're just under an indictment.
Yeah.
What was the outcome of the case?
Oh, it was guilt. I mean, but her time was up before it went to trial as a grand juror.
Did she know? Did she ever know?
Well, you would think she knew. I guess she thought, I'm gonna get to sit on my own.
Hell yeah.
But
nope, no
sure,
true bill.
Sure as the world. And they pulled her out one.
Now,
That's fun. That's cool. That's cool.
And the thing with grand juries are you get to know the names and the faces, and then after it's over with, they know you.
And
more,
they
they'll see you
a
out.
lot of them will refer to you by first name.
Yeah,
So,
hey, and they'll see you out, and you kind of develop a relationship, even though you don't know, but you learn more about them afterwards because you don't want to be communicating with them because it's every month you see the same.
Same ones
And
for a year.
And then after that year, you see them out, you can small talk with them,
Yeah.
And it's really, I always loved going in front of the grand jury too. That was always a good thing.
Yeah. But the most important things I see attorneys miss the boat on is they don't follow up with jurors after a verdict's made, whether it's found guilty or
good,
not
bad, or
guilty,
ugly.
responsible or not responsible. They
Yes.
should go in here and say, Your Honor, I'd like to speak to the juror. And they don't have to speak to the attorney afterward, but it's always good. What were you thinking? Where did we miss the boat, or what was the overwhelming evidence that you saw, or what was lacking? Because they can learn from that.
Or what did we do right? What did you?
Yeah.
You know, and hammer that home next time.
Right. And
You know.
it's always interesting. And Joel did that. He went back to, and Blair Cody does that. Vanessa Hawkins does that. Those attorneys that we work for, they'll question that jury afterwards and find out as much as they can.
And I think, and I'm not an attorney. We're not. None of us are attorneys. But law is not only an art, but it's a science. You got to look at the science part of it.
You do.
You know, it's not just the.
But that's where we're missing the boat a lot of times. The science, not only on the evidence, but the jury selection, the personalities, the human factor that goes into to all this, and what's going on in that person's personal life. You know, is this individual a victim of sex crimes as a child? Is this individual a victim of domestic violence? All these things are important. And I wish there was more data where, and I'm sure these big firms have all this information at their disposal when they go in there. Okay, 30% of this population has been involved in, DWI or whatever the case may be, to where you can kind of measure it a little bit and measure the data to help you with an outcome. I think it's just,
and let's say you had a guy that had a previous conviction of DWI. He's on the jury or potential a juror in a DWI case. You know, he might say, hey, I was guilty when I got my DWI and I got punished. He might want to be the juror too, like we talked about, or he might be vice versa. Oh, I shouldn't have. This shouldn't. They should have never convicted me.
Yes.
So you got to look at that.
Right. But that's kind of like the never pick a juror with profession starts with a P.
Yeah.
The police officer. Okay. When I went into that jury that day, I didn't know way in hell they're going to let me sit on this jury, but they did. And it's just, and both sides really did their homework. I was on, my voir dire lasted for 2 days. So they really got in the deep nitty gritty with what's going on, how I felt, and which was good on both sides, I thought. And so it's been an interesting topic. And
That's another topic we could go for days.
Yeah, we could. And maybe we can get maybe a juror, if we can find one that wants to come in and sit down and talk to us, especially if it's been on a big case.
That and an attorney talking with us about jury selection.
Yeah.
Both. I mean, maybe have 2 different episodes, spinoffs.
We might bring Joel back or bring in Blair and see if he'd be interested in doing it. But it's been fun. We got last call coming up. We got something good, I think, right?
Yep.
Good deal. Okay. Until last call, good to see all of you. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you again next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Monday afternoon roundtable. We got the last call.
Red-eyed Louie.
Red-eyed Louie.
Yeah, we're going to do 2, though. 2 different.
We are. We're going to start with Vodquila.
Vodquila,
excuse me.
Vodquila?
Vodka and tequila, 80 proof. Tell you a little bit about it. It's a special blend of ultra premium vodka and imported super premium tequila. The vodka is made from multiple grains of distilled 6 times, whereas the tequila is made from pure blue agave plants distilled in the highlands of Mexico. It's supposed to be super clean taste and rich aroma by mixing the tequila and the vodka together. So we're going to try it here. I don't know whose idea this was.
Mine.
Okay, so we're going to, okay, give me your glass. Okay.
Easy now.
That's Tim.
Jeez, Louise.
Damn.
Jason. David.
Smells like rubbing alcohol.
It does.
So we're not tequila drinkers and we're not vodka drinkers. We tried some vodka the other week and it wasn't bad. And so Tim was talking about this, so we're going to try it for everyone today to kind of give them I love the bottle. It's got a skull with a.
Yeah, it's cool looking.
Yeah. Anyhow, cheers. Hope it goes down smooth.
Yeah, I hope to.
ain't bad. It's not bad.
I don't like it.
No, that's not. I thought it was going to be much more bite than that was. So that's pretty smooth.
Bites on the back end.
I can tell both. I can taste both the tequila and the vodka. Tequila a little bit stronger, of course, but I'm good. We're not going to score this one.
Good.
But
A 5.
but no. I think it's better than that. I think it's I'd buy it. How much was it, Tim?
$3.
It wasn't as bad as I was thinking. But it was.
I liked it. So anyhow, let's try this Jameson. Tell us a little bit about this Jameson.
No, I don't know. I'm just going to read off of
Okay.
it.
It's RS whiskey.
Jameson Black Barrel, a tribute to the legacy of charring barrels before filling them. Our Coopers called it bringing the wood back to life. Black Barrel features charred and double charred bourbon barrels that deliver unique spiciness, vanilla sweetness, and nutty notes. It is 40% alcohol or 80 proof.
It's
It's
Irish
from,
whiskey.
Yeah, from Dublin, Ireland.
There you go.
Cool.
Let's
This
try.
was on our list to.
Yeah, I saw that. So you remember who requested it? We'll have to look. We'll call them out next time.
That wasn't that bad.
No, that'd be a good toast or a good shot to have before you have a good whiskey or a cold beer. Thank you. That's good.
It's paying him back. Well,
Pour to the line.
That looks good. All right, let's test it.
Jameson Black Label.
You have those that are true Jameson drinkers. They order it
that
every
is
time they go to the
smooth.
bar.
it's the
Yeah,
smoothest thing I've
smooth,
ever.
yeah.
I know.
a friend of mine, that's all he drinks, and he loves it. And it's an acquired taste like any other whiskey or bourbon, but I like it.
And I don't know. This might sound stupid. I mean, it's very smooth, almost to the point where. Do you reckon that had any effect on the?
Perhaps, yes.
I mean,
Well, you said that last time we did the vodka. You remember?
I mean, it's like smooth as.
Kool-Aid. That'd sneak up on you pretty quick
Yeah.
through the bar. So you'd have to. Friend of mine, Gene Spainhour, that's what he drinks. He loves it. A couple friends of mine enjoy drinking it, and I've had it at their bars before, so it's pretty good. So I'd highly recommend it. What's the price on this one, Tim?
I don't know.
Did you get it as a gift?
No.
Did you steal it?
Yep.
No, I know you did. So anyhow,
I can't remember. I really don't know.
and again, we're not whiskey nor bourbon connoisseurs, but we both like it. All three of us like it. Jason's learning to like it. We when our viewers talk about something they want us to try, we'll try that. So today we've had a little bit of both. But I think you're right, Jason. I think that brought the flavor of the oak barrels out by drinking that first.
Flavor's good.
So what you need to do is take a shot of
Yeah.
Red Eye Louis first, and have a good ice drink or on the rocks whiskey, and then you can't go wrong. All right.
It's a good strategy.
Had a great podcast today. I
We're
enjoyed
over
it.
we're over 1,100 members. Share, like, subscribe.
Comment. Like we say, we want your
Get your
opinions.
friends to jump on. It's fun to watch sometimes.
Yeah.
It's entertaining.
If you like to listen to a podcast, listen to it on Spotify. If you like to watch it as a video on YouTube,
I'd much rather listen than watch because I see all the, I don't,
it's very.
what'd you say? Our face was for radio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see that
And
sometimes.
plus, it's easier when you're working or in the car on a drive. To throw the podcast on. I enjoy that.
And there's a lot of cool podcasts out there right now
yeah.
that you can just whatever genre you want to listen to. But the true crime is a big one, and that's the genre we're under right now is true crime, and we need to kind of bring some of that back into the picture. Today we talked about jury selection, which falls into that, of course. In any criminal case, you're going to have a jury trial most of the time. So today was good. So I highly recommend it. It was episode 27. We talked about jury science and jury selection. So anyhow, this has been a good episode.
What kind of rating we going to give?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to get it.
Jameson.
8.5 from David.
9.
I'm 8.5 to 9, somewhere in there. I mean, it's good. It's very good.
Once again, we haven't had a bad one yet, and so that's a good thing.
Even those that wasn't bad. I mean, I'm hard on it, but I mean, it's just different.
Well, we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And so, but once we had it, it was again, I think it was a good starting drink, and we can go from there.
We got a guest lined up for next week. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
Tell us about that. Jason.
Tentative. We've got a guy that we used to work with as a deputy up in Caldwell County. I think he's retired military now.
He
Did
is.
20 years with the Army, or he's a real good guy, and he started a nonprofit, or he's getting the nonprofit started. It's involving veterans, and from what I'm looking at, maybe working on a farm or doing farm work or something to that effect.
He's a good guy, and whatever he
Great
brings
guy.
is going to be a good topic.
And it was just basically we were negotiating. We were talking, hammering out logistics right as we were getting ready to film. So I don't have a lot of, but hopefully he'll be able to come next week, and I think it'll be a great episode.
Good deal.
When's David coming back?
Well, hopefully soon as well. David Childers he was under the weather for a couple of weeks, so we're looking to get him back and talk more about his. He's got a nonprofit that he
Which
works
kind of
close.
falls hand in hand.
Yeah, it's very similar. Both of them are dealing with veterans and helping them with post
Didn't David say early July, maybe?
maybe before then. Hopefully, but post once they get out of the military, dealing with all kinds of things and being proactive toward mental health, not just physical health.
I think that's where law enforcement's lacking a lot, not just a little
time.
bit, a lot
Big time.
is the mental health portion of it. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago in one of our podcasts that, we get physicals every year, we get dental, we get eye checkups, but mental's kind of put out there.
It's got to,
and not pursued, and it should be, because that's the number one issue right now, suicide among law enforcement.
yeah.
It's huge.
I mean, and if you look at law enforcement in general, they have a higher case of suicide, higher case of divorce, higher case of drug abuse, higher case of alcohol abuse, higher case of domestic violence. All and that's related to mental health issues from the job.
And you got 3 ex-cops sitting there drinking.
And that's
Yeah. I mean, but not.
But the problem I've seen in law enforcement is asking for help is the number one problem.
It's
Right, it's
stigmatized.
pride, and it's the red tape associated with it.
Yes.
The privacy, because everybody in the department normally knows it after the individual requests it, whether it's for domestic violence, whether it's mental health, alcohol, drugs, whatever it may be. I was seeing drugs as a big issue before I left. Steroids, recreational drugs, cocaine, Schedule II, all of those. And it's scary.
Yeah.
What goes on because law enforcement, and I'm getting off on my soapbox just a minute, but law enforcement's just a reflection of society.
It is.
That's all we are. And so they're going to have the same issues, the same problems, mental health, domestic violence, alcohol, drug abuse, all those things are going to happen within that law enforcement community as well.
The problem is they teach you to be so self-reliant on survival, and they have to. They have to. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but that makes you think, I can fix
Handle
this.
everything.
Yeah, I can handle anything that's thrown at me, and you have resources available, and they're not being used.
Well, it makes the individual sometimes look weak
Yeah.
because of either the policy, the way it's written, or the procedure that the individual has to go through to get the help. And so they just decide not to do it based on all everything goes along
Stigmatism,
with it.
yeah.
Stigmatism.
That'll be a good episode next week.
Yeah. I'm going to have another. You guys want one?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to go type.
Okay. All right. Thanks again for joining us. Hope you enjoyed last call. Monday afternoon roundtable. Thanks again. See
Thank
you
you.
next time. Bye.